Great, I think we should probably get started now. Welcome to this new space at the University of Washington, the Intellectual House. Fantastic little space. I'm glad we'll be able to share it with you and enjoy this nice weather and this nice space. Welcome on behalf of the chapter of AAUP, UW chapter. I'm Rob Wood. I'm the president of the chapter, local chapter of AAUP, American Association of University Professors, and I'd just like to welcome you all here. I think we're going to have a very interesting session today, a very interesting series of speakers, hopefully, who are going to talk about experiences they've had with unionization and being part of a union, faculty union, and what that can mean, and what that can achieve. So I'd like to introduce the secretary of the chapter, Amy Hagopian, who's going to be our MC for the afternoon. Amy is a faculty member, professor in global health in the School of Public Health, and she's here today she's going to do a great service to us and introduce the speakers and keep the discussion going. Great, thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Rob. Raise your hand if you are an AAUP board member. So these are the people who helped plan this event and put this together, so thank you to all of you. This is our annual meeting. We do this every spring. Last year we were in Padelford Hall over at the Evans School. One of the things we like to do at this event is to issue awards. Awards are a great way for an organization to signal our thanks to people and to notice the values that we hold dear and who shares those with us. So I will be issuing awards throughout the program tonight, and I have two to start with. The first one, interestingly, is to Governor Jay Inslee, who we are issuing our Friend of the Faculty Award, specifically for nominating non-corporate members of the Board of Regents. And as we say in our certificate, with hopes for more of the same. So obviously Governor Inslee is not here, so we will pass this along to him. Our second award to start today is the Courage in Pursuit of Social Justice Award, which we are issuing to City Councilwoman Shama Sawant for her leadership in the fight for 15 to uplift the living conditions of so many, including UW students and staff. All right, so we'll have more of those as we go along. So let's just get to the speakers. The way we're going to do this today is each speaker will tell us for about 10 minutes what it was like to unionize faculty on their campus. And when they are done, we're going to talk a little bit about the union campaign here, and then we'll have question and answer. So first up, we have Bill Lyne, who is president of the United Faculty of Washington State, which represents the faculty at Central Washington University, Eastern Washington, and Western Washington universities, as well as the Evergreen State College. He formerly served as president of the United Faculty of Western Washington University, and he is a board member of the directors of Washington Education Association and the National Education Association, and a former member of the board of directors of the American Federation of Teachers, Washington. He is professor of English at Western Washington University. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, and thanks for coming out, and thanks for having me here today. Amy told us to keep it to 10 minutes, so I'll give you the 10-minute version of why I think a union is good for faculty. I imagine there might have been a golden age of shared governance, but it doesn't exist now. We're not living in that golden age right now. I think one of the things that we have to recognize and admit is that the pressures and perspectives and interests of administration and regents and trustees are very different from the perspective and interests of faculty. With the drive toward privatizing public universities, with the cuts in state support that have come to public universities, and with the drive to make public universities sort of technical training grounds for employees, the pressures and perspectives that bear down on university administrators give them a whole different set of interests than the ones that we have as faculty. Quite often, I think we try to paper over those differences in perspective and interest by saying, oh, we're all in this together, or we're all the same, or we used to be faculty too, stuff like that. When in fact, I think it's much, much healthier to admit those differences in interests and perspectives, and that the healthiest way to negotiate those differences is with collective bargaining. What collective bargaining is a tool for the faculty to have a genuine voice in the shared governance of the university. When we were organizing at Western, one of the slogans that the administration would use would be, do you want to go from a shared governance model like the one that we have now to an employee-employer relationship that would come with collective bargaining, trying to convince us, I guess, that we were somehow not employees of the university as long as we didn't unionize. We countered that by saying, look, what we have now is not shared governance. The kind of relationship that we have now with the administration is a parent-child relationship, where we were able to advise, we were able to suggest, we had endless committees that were able to make recommendations, but at the end of the day, the administration was able to do what they want. What collective bargaining does is give you a legally binding voice. When you come to the bargaining table, everybody has to sit there until both sides agree. And when you have that agreement, both sides have to live with it. You can't just, if something changes, you can't just say, well, we're not going to do this anymore. It's not a university policy, it's a legally binding contract. And that is, I think, the most valuable thing about collective bargaining for faculty. The thing that it made us do, and the thing that it has made us do at all 4 of our campuses, is come to the table together, administration and faculty, and actually have to listen to each other. Nobody could leave and go do whatever they wanted without us reaching an agreement. So we had to sit there at the bargaining table, and the administration had to genuinely pay attention to the concerns, interests, and perspectives that we were bringing to the bargaining table. And we had to genuinely pay attention and try to understand some of their perspectives too. And it actually, I have to admit, there were times at the bargaining table where the administration would make a point where I would say, wow, you've got a good point, this is a problem that we need to solve for you guys. Without that legal arrangement, without the arrangement where we both had to be there until we agreed, the incentive to genuinely listen to each other, to genuinely understand each other, wouldn't have been there. And at the end of the day, at all 4 of the campuses that we represent, the relationship between the administration and the faculty has not gotten worse, it has gotten immeasurably better since we have unionized, because we are able to come to the table, genuinely listen to each other, and then we have an agreement that we all have to take responsibility for. The way it was before is the administration would do things, they would say, well, we consulted the faculty, so there was lots of faculty input about this, so it's all okay, and a kind of simmering resentment was always there within the faculty, was always there having to either say, no, you're lying, or buying into the lie. Either way, it wasn't satisfying for us. Now that we have a contract, now that we have a thing that we've negotiated in a legally binding way, we all have to take responsibility for it, and if we screwed something up as the faculty, we have to live with it, and it's our fault. And that has created a lot more respect between the administration and the faculty than we had before we had collective bargaining. It also allowed us to make real progress on the things that mattered to faculty. For us, we did lots of faculty surveys while we were organizing and after we won our vote. The 2 things that mattered most for us were faculty salaries and workload protection. Those were that's probably a universal thing, but it's always important with a faculty union to make sure that you are hearing the voice of your faculty, that you're hearing the voice of the faculty at Western, or the faculty at Eastern, or the faculty at Central, or the faculty at UW. We have 4 separate campuses in UFWS, and we have 4 separate contracts which are appropriate for the environment at each of our institutions. The 2 things at Western that mattered the most for us were salaries and workload. On salaries, we have made tremendous progress. In the years since we've organized, in our 3 contracts, faculty salaries have gone up by about 35%, and we have risen in those rankings that AAUP does of the faculty salaries. We've risen from about the 33rd percentile to about the 50th percentile of our peer institutions. We made that an issue at the bargaining table, and for years before that, the administration had said again and again, faculty salaries are our #1 priority. But not until we unionized did that #1 priority actually begin to get acted on in the university budget. Probably more important than that for our faculty was the question of workload. When we would do our surveys, workload, it always, our salaries were abysmal enough, we thought that would be the #1 thing, but in fact, it was always workload. And in each of our contracts, we've managed to enshrine a workload section that doesn't allow the administration to raise our workload. It keeps it at the historical levels that it was when we began with collective bargaining. That paid huge dividends during the big economic downturn between 2008 and now. When university budgets started getting slashed, the unimaginative thing that our deans and provosts wanted to do was raise class sizes, make us teach more classes, things like that. And they would have done that had we not had a contract that prohibited them from doing that. That has been probably the best thing that we've been able to do. And again, it was because we made it a priority at the table. And we were able to make the argument at the table that that our working and teaching conditions were the conditions that our students learned with. Were our students' learning conditions. And we were right about that. That's one of the nice things about public university collective bargaining. Both sides come to the table saying the same things. We're here to do what is best for the students. We're usually the ones who are right about that. So I've been reading on your AAUP list about the new faculty salary policy that the UW Faculty Senate has been working on here. And in reading the policy itself, it actually looked like a pretty good policy from the outside looking in. As long as you do not have collective bargaining here, that will always be at the will of the administration. Okay, that policy, even if it gets enacted and enshrined as a policy, is always available to be suspended or overturned. If you make something like that part of a contract, it can't be changed. A contract's a contract, a deal's a deal. If you negotiate with the Senate or something like that, and you come up with a collective bargaining or a salary policy, that's always something that is at the whim of the administration. If you do it at the bargaining table, you do the exact same thing, and you put it in a contract, it's there, it's enforceable. And that really is the biggest difference. I went from being faculty senate president at Western to being union president. And the only thing that really changed was that the faculty genuinely had some power as a union rather than as a faculty senate. Nothing about the agenda of the faculty changed. Nothing about what we were trying to get accomplished changed. All of the ideas that we had and were continually making arguments about at the Senate carried over to the union. When I was Senate president, I used to roll into the provost's office every 2 weeks. We had a standing meeting, and I'd come in with a list, and I would say, here's the 10 ways that your deans broke the law this week. And he would say, deans, what are you going to do? And that would sort of be the end of it. 3 days into being union president, I don't even remember what the problem was, but something came up. I called the provost's office, it got fixed that day. That's the difference. That's really what collective bargaining is. It is legally binding power that gives you a tool to bring genuine shared governance back to the university and to make the faculty perspective, the faculty voice, the faculty interests, a big part of the governance of the university. The other thing that unionization gives you is political power. When the first time I ever went to Olympia in connection with a union was the president of my university was there at the same day. I spent the day walking by her into one office after another. About halfway through, I thought, okay, I see why. What politicians do at the end of the day is count money and count votes. Universities, as state agencies, bring neither one of those things. Unions bring both, and they bring them in spades. About halfway through the day, I thought, okay, these people aren't letting me into their offices just because I'm a nice guy. It's because the people who knocked on the door were from the Washington Education Association, who is the biggest union in the state with $3 million in PAC money. Since we have unionized at the 4 regional institutions, higher education as a political issue in this state has gone up dramatically. Okay, I mean, we now have, in the budget negotiations taking place in the Olympia right now, we now have the House and the Senate fighting over who is going to be perceived as better for higher education. Before we unionized, that never used to happen. Okay, the higher ed was, I mean, in fact, the first time I ever went to Olympia, I had a Republican state senator who greeted me very effusively, said, wow, it's great to see you, higher ed, I love higher ed, I went to college, I had a great time, you guys are great, you do a great job. But I've got to tell you, you're never going to be on the top of my list because I never get any campaign money because of you guys, and no one ever calls me about higher education. As a union, the United Faculty of Washington State has changed both of those things. And now, higher education is a voting issue in this state. If UW was to have a union, higher education would be an even more potent voting issue in this state. That is an incredibly important, and another way that you can create real bonds with your administration. We work very closely with our administrations. I mean, I know every university administration lobbyist in this state. We've worked closely on all kinds of policy and budget activity in the state. When we're on campus, we have a lot of things to fight about. As soon as we step off campus and start heading toward the state capitol, there's really very little daylight between us. We're both looking for more funding for public higher education in this state. And our unionization has been a huge boon for that in state politics. So I guess what I'm happy to answer any questions about when the question time comes, about the details of how this works, what you can do, what you can't do, things like that. But generally speaking, what unionization is, what collective bargaining is a tool that you can use. And it's a very powerful tool because it's got lots of law behind it that allows you to enforce it. It's a tool that you can use well, it's a tool that you can use badly. You could very well unionize and do a lot of stupid stuff and screw it up. Okay, I mean, it's not like it's some panacea, it's not like it's some kind of nirvana. It's a lot of work. It will be a lot of work for you guys to convince your colleagues that this is a good idea. Believe me, at Western we won our election by 16 votes. And we're pretty snotty, but not as snotty as some of your colleagues. I mean, you will find a lot of people in the faculty who think unions are for people who take a shower after work rather than before, and it'll be that visceral. But what it is a tool. It's a tool that can be used really well or really badly, but the good thing about collective bargaining and about unionizing is that if you screw it up, you will know that you can only blame yourselves. Like I say, I'll be happy to answer any kind of questions about that.
Thank you, Bill. That was fantastic. I don't know what made me think we could just give over microphones to professors without a timekeeper. So, all right. So Louisa's up next, but I have a couple of awards to give. Next is for Richard Moore. Where is he? I know he was here. Excellent. Please step forward. This is for serving as the founding president of the first faculty union at the University of Washington, to successfully negotiate a contract for previously disenfranchised international and English language program faculty. Thank you.
I'm losing my voice. I just want to say thank you very much, AAUP leadership and members of AAUP were so helpful to us in our struggle, and the other unions like David here, UAW, SCIU, WFC. But most of all, I want to thank my colleagues who are just wonderful, and most of our bargaining team is here. I think faculty in the IALP are just an amazing group of people, and without those people, we would never have done anything. So I just want to thank my colleagues.
Thank you. All right. Our next award is for our next speaker. So we would like to acknowledge Louisa Edgerly for her role in leading the Seattle University Adjuncts and Contingents Together Union as they are struggling to clinch their final union contract there. So come on up. I'm going to introduce you. So Dr. Edgerly earned her doctorate in communications here, right across the street, at the Communications School at the University of Washington in 2010. And she has worked as an adjunct faculty member at both the UW and Seattle University, and she conducts research on intercultural communication in global health settings. She has been an active member of the Seattle University Union Organizing Committee since January of 2014. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've had some summer jobs with IELP, so you guys rock. Thank you, everybody, so much. Thank you, AAUP. And this is really on behalf of all of my colleagues. And I'd really like to acknowledge my colleague, Michael Eng, who came here with me from Seattle U. He has been a founding organizer not only at Seattle U, but before that at Pacific Lutheran U. And some of you may know the saga of PLU's organizing campaign. And Michael is just a rock. And Anne and Larry and everybody who has done this. This is just tremendous. And I got to tell the dean that we got this award this afternoon and watch his face fall. So, all right. And I was a TA for public speaking for 5 quarters. So Laura, you can tell Matt I brought my note cards and I have my timer. So thank you very much. What I'd like to do today is just give you a very brief history of our process of organizing at Seattle U, how that's been going, what we're up to now, talk a little bit about what motivates us as faculty to come together and try to form our union, and also talk a little bit about how this whole process has transformed us. So they began organizing in fall of 2013 at Seattle U, right? Yeah. And eventually, these discussions led them to decide to organize with SCIU. And this has been a really productive and excellent partnership ever since then. I think one of the reasons I'm here is to talk about organizing with SCIU, since that's what you guys are going to be doing. Welcome to the movement. We are psyched you are here. We've got a lot to do. We started to organize with SCIU, did the card campaign on campus, organizing support, rallying members, persuading people to join the organizing committee. When I got there for my first quarter adjuncting, In the winter of 2014, very shortly after I got rejected from another tenure-track job, an organizer showed up in my classroom and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing. Would you like to participate?" And it seemed like a good idea. I had been extremely aware of the conditions facing adjunct faculty and all faculty in higher education for years, and this gave me a way to do something about it. And I went to my first organizing committee meeting, and I met Michael and all the rest of the group, and I discovered this was something really important to a lot of people, and it was something I could participate in. And by the spring of 2014, we had enough support. We filed a petition to hold our election, and we did. We had a great election campaign. We did a ton of get out the vote calling. You guys will understand what that means soon. And we had a great election. We polled. We were very certain that we won. We were also very certain that those votes were never going to get counted. And they weren't. They were impounded as soon as they were cast because the administration at Seattle University appealed our very right to hold an election or form a union. So, thank you. Yeah, they are appealing our right to form a union on the grounds of freedom of religion. Yeah. And they also wanted to claim that any full-time faculty organizing with us were not, in fact, employees, but management. I don't know how many of you are non-tenure track full-time faculty, but are you management? We have had, I think, 4 total rulings from the NLRB at this point in our favor, agreeing that we have a right to form a union. We've had rulings from the NLRB ordering Seattle University to count our votes. They are still impounded. The university is still appealing. We will get to count our votes. We will form a union. We are going to then try and get them to the bargaining table by hook or by crook. So it has been a long, hard road. It ain't over yet. The university's delay tactics have worked in their favor since, as Amy mentioned, we are adjunct and contingent faculty. And a lot of us won't be there by the time the votes are counted, which probably won't happen this academic year. A lot of us won't be there when we finally get to the bargaining table, and we won't even be covered by a contract that we get to that our colleagues will get to negotiate, inshallah. So we have been working for almost 2 years now to accomplish something that a lot of us won't even get to benefit from, because the administration has also manufactured a budget crisis, which makes it really easy to get rid of us. So when you have it in a contract, I can't agree more, it matters. Having a contract and not having a contract matters. It makes a huge difference, and that's what all of us are fighting for at Seattle U right now. And we'd like to see our tenured colleagues get on board too. They have been tremendous allies. And that brings me to our shared motivations and concerns. As adjunct and contingent faculty, we're concerned about the very same things that all faculty are concerned about: the corporatization of higher ed, the complete lack of meaningful shared governance or a role to participate in running this institution that governs our lives, that controls the lives of our students, that is supposedly producing new knowledge and understanding. We don't actually get to play a meaningful role. Having a contract, being a bigger part of the university would allow us to do that. Being a bigger part of the university as a whole, being considered full partners and participants was a really important consideration for a lot of us. And decision-making that leads to program cuts, instruction cuts, faculty cuts, and ultimately hurts our students was a huge concern for everybody that's gotten involved with organizing. We've seen how the university administration, when they have a free hand, when there are no contracts, make decisions to cut programs, to cut majors, eliminate entire departments, rejoin Division I athletics instead of creating office space for faculty, making decisions that ultimately hurt student learning conditions and hurt our working conditions. So we want a union for the same reasons that you guys want a union. It has been a really inspiring experience to get to meet all of my colleagues, because again, when you're an adjunct, you don't necessarily get to meet everybody. So it's been awesome to get to meet everybody and hear echoed over and over again these shared concerns that have driven all of us to work so hard for so long. And we're so close, really, really close. And what has been really unexpected, this is the unexpected benefit of organizing and of organizing campaigns. Yeah, it's hard and it's time consuming, and oh my God, so many meetings. You think you have meetings now, right? And phone banking and talking to your colleagues and persuading them. And when you teach persuasion, you end up being the person that everybody asks, how do I persuade so-and-so? What will move them? So all of your disciplinary knowledge is going to come to bear on this problem in some way or another. But the most amazing thing that I didn't expect was how it has transformed the culture at Seattle University. It has transformed relationships between faculty in a good way, in a really good way. As the fight has gone on, as the struggle has continued, and as the movement has grown, we have built stronger and better relationships. We have formed alliances with our tenured colleagues, found friends in unexpected places. We have people still suddenly deciding to join our organizing committee, folks who had been too afraid, folks who didn't think that they had a stake in it, or folks who just weren't sure that it was what they wanted to do. And as we have gone on, we have gotten stronger. And the other amazing thing has been the student support. We have gotten to work closely with student activists on campus. We have heard directly from them how much they care about our lives, our working lives, and about learning. So I know once in a while we doubt that, right? Every now and then you're like, do they really care? Yeah, they really care. They show up for rallies in the rain, they make posters with us, they have meetings, they write petitions, they go petition the president of the university, they practically get kicked out. They really care about what we are doing, and their support has been an amazing discovery. And what it has done for the campus, because apparently I did not know this, but there was apparently a culture of apathy at Seattle U. I didn't know, and you could have fooled me, because it has electrified our campus and united faculty and students and staff in a way that a lot of longtime faculty there told me they never thought was possible. And we've met people in all the other colleges, and we get together, and we hang out, and we talk, and we share stories about what really matters about teaching to us. And it's been fantastic. And to see the students learn and grow in their activism through this process has also been really, really terrific. So, it ultimately ended up, as I think a lot of the SEIU organizers will tell you, they did not think that faculty were going to go so far as to sit down in the middle of an intersection in downtown Seattle and get themselves arrested for the sake of their union, which is exactly what we did. And it's been fabulous to see the radicalization of my colleagues. Michael's like, dude, I will not wear your t-shirt. So, welcome to the movement. We need you, and we really want you, and this is going to be awesome. All right, you are in for a fun ride, and it's going to be a lot of work, but there's a lot to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, we have two more awards. One is Hugh Spitzer, and the other is Adam Sherman. Are you both here? So we want to acknowledge these two individuals for their amazing work, which you hopefully have read about in the Seattle Times and elsewhere, to establish the constitutional case for adequately funding Washington State's universities. So we are issuing them the Courage and Pursuit of Excellence in Washington State Higher Education Awards. You should be looking for more work from these gentlemen who we will be supporting as you move forward. We all know about the McCleary case, and I'm sure we're soon going to hear the Sherman-Spitzer case. So next we have Stuart McLean, who is visiting us from the University of Minnesota. He's Associate Professor of Anthropology there, and he earned his PhD from Columbia University. His research concerns art and creativity, historical memory, and perceptions of landscape and environment. That's the great thing about faculty organizing, is they're involved in all these amazingly different disciplines. He has carried out fieldwork in Ireland, Denmark, and the Orkney Islands, and he's been actively involved from the beginning in the current campaign to unionize the faculty at the University of Minnesota's Twin Cities campus.
Well, as you've just heard, the campaign to unionize faculty at the University of Minnesota is still very much ongoing. So most of what I'm able to speak to is my own reasons for getting involved in this and what I perceive to be some of my colleagues' reasons. As you may have spotted from my accent, I'm not from these parts. I grew up and went to college in the UK and then moved to the US to go to graduate school. I mention that because in the course of talking to various colleagues through unionization efforts at the University of Minnesota, I've often encountered a reaction of surprise at the very idea of faculty unionization, that people are startled that there could be such a thing. They're surprised at the idea that this is something that could be for them. They've never thought of what they do as something that had anything particular to do with unions. For me, however, when I first moved to the United States to start graduate school, I was actually surprised that the majority of faculty at both public and private institutions in the US were not unionized. That in my home country, there's the University and College Union, which is a union that in fact represents both permanent and contingent faculty at national level. So for me, it had always seemed that this was a perfectly normal thing to do, and it was something that certainly seemed to be widely accepted in British academia. I also mentioned the fact that I'm not from these parts because I would very much regard myself as the product of what, at least at the time in Britain, was still a well-funded system of public higher education, that there were no university fees when I went to college, that people were supported by state maintenance grants based on parental income. And as a result of that, and only as a result of that, I was able to become the first person ever in my own family to in fact go to college and graduate. So I want to say a little bit about why I personally felt motivated to get involved in the University of Minnesota's faculty unionization effort, and why this for me has come to seem an increasingly urgent matter. Partly it's because as myself a beneficiary of public higher education, I've been increasingly concerned that present and future generations are being denied the opportunities from which I benefited, partly as a result of rising tuition fees, increasing levels of student debt, making higher education prohibitively expensive for some people, but also as a result of misguided administrative priorities, politically motivated public funding cuts, and pressure from corporate sponsors pushing universities increasingly towards a narrowly vocational emphasis, treating students as paying customers, being trained to occupy corporate-defined employment niches. And this strikes me as a view that's dangerously disregardful of at least two of the most fundamental principles of any kind of university education. First, the notion that students are customers who should presumably as such be given what they're perceived to want, ignores the fact that education, whatever else it might be, is a transformative, or should be, a transformative process, and that our role as educators is as I would see it, to change what our students want, to expand their sense of possibility, to expand their sense of who they might become. And certainly I would regard myself as very much the beneficiary of educators who saw that as their role. Secondly, it seems to me also that the most important thing any university produces is people, citizens who are actively engaged in collective life, who are able to think creatively and critically, and most importantly of all, to imagine and enact alternatives to currently established arrangements, whether these take the form of technological innovations or works of art or social movements or whatever else. It also seems to me that students are not the only ones who are paying the price for some of these changes that are taking place. A lot of my own colleagues, including very much tenure track and tenured faculty, have expressed strong concern about the situation of contingent faculty who make up who do an increasing proportion of the teaching certainly at the University of Minnesota and elsewhere, and who do so in return for low pay, no or minimal benefits, and precarious conditions of employment, not knowing whether they're going to have a job the following semester until often quite late in the day. Although obviously tenured and tenure-track faculty like myself are in a sense better off, we've also had to deal with budget cuts, reduced research funding, cuts to research leaves, and also in the case of some institutions like UNC, attempts by hostile state legislatures to increase faculty workloads. And underlying all of these, as I would see it, the problem of faculty governance, or the erosion of faculty governance, that decisions are taken by senior administrators or boards of regents filled by corporate representatives, with faculty senates being reduced to the role of simply rubber stamping what is presented to them as a fait accompli. So part of my reason for getting involved in the unionisation effort at the U of M was a sense of having had enough of misguided decisions made by people I had no say in appointing, whose judgment I don't trust, and who made no effort to consult me in the making of the said misguided decisions. And it might have been less misguided if they'd done so. So it's for that reason I'm very much committed to the project of forming a union at the University of Minnesota. Because it seems to me that this is, in effect, the only way of achieving any kind of possibility of pushback against the developments that I and many of my faculty colleagues find so disturbing. It seems to me these demand the acquisition of a collective voice, of a voice capable of making itself heard at both university and state level. And this is not least because the problems that need to be addressed are collective problems. They're problems that confront us collectively in the guise of institutional structures, budgets, student pedagogy, working conditions, and terms of employment. And it's also been striking to me that unionisation has been extraordinarily effective in addressing some of these specific concerns. So, for example, institutions that have formed unions affiliated to SEIU, in the case of working conditions in terms of employment of contingent faculty, have seen very, very significant improvements. And this is true both of private institutions like Tufts and George Washington University, and of public ones like the CSU campuses that formed unions in affiliation with SEIU. My main reason, though, for arguing for the need to seek collective representation in the form of a union doesn't have to do with any specific issue or list of issues, with what I see as a much more wide-ranging debate, conflict going on between competing visions of what a university and a university education is or could be. Many of the changes associated with what's sometimes called the neoliberal or corporate university have been justified on the basis of the claim that universities need to embrace change, that they need to move with the times, that they need to adapt themselves to the requirements of a changing employment market, and that corporations somehow provide a model of how they might go about doing this. This seems to me a set of claims that's absolutely supersaturated with errors and false assumptions, and one that, moreover, in purporting to make universities more quote-unquote relevant to the present, in fact has the effect of rendering them profoundly irrelevant. So by way of an illustration, I'd like to quote from a document produced at my home institution, the University of Minnesota, by the College of Liberal Arts, in which the Department of Anthropology, where I teach, is housed. This is a document called CLA 2015, which is setting out, quote unquote, what the 21st century will demand of us and of our graduates. And according to this document, this includes greater intellectual agility, competence in the face of increasing complexity, deeper understanding of differences, and improved ways of living in common. I don't particularly want to take issue with any of these aspirations, and that they all, in fact, strike me as a good thing. And it should also be noted that this is a document that was collectively authored by a committee under a particular set of institutional constraints. But I do want to note that characteristically of much current discourse about universities, such a demand for change seems to be understood as issuing exclusively from outside the university. So it's suggested that the world has changed and the university must do so too. This is another quotation from the same document. We must expand our community engagement, service and outreach and take care that we are providing the sort of quote-unquote help that actually benefits our communities. Our research and our teaching and our service must demonstrate their value beyond the campus. It is not sufficient simply to talk about it. Our students, faculty and staff must engage and help put the public into the public research university. So again, in a sense, very laudable, but what might this entail? It strikes me that to portray universities as responding and reaching out, albeit creatively, innovatively, etc., to a set of needs that are assumed to be generated beyond their own precincts, also risks denying the university any active role in producing the social environments to which it must allegedly adapt. So to proclaim the need for universities to address changes taking place in the wider world, it might be said, has the effect, paradoxically, of actually detaching universities from that world, implying that they do not participate in and shape it, but merely respond to demands issuing from beyond their own institutional confines, or at least that their capacity to intervene is of a very much secondary and derivative character, that it's based on responding to imperatives they've played no part themselves in authoring. But it seems to me that to make the case of the future of the university in such terms is actually to concede from the outset the very ground that most urgently needs to be contested. All too often, arguments for the reform or the modernization of universities seem to risk disavowing the very possibility that universities themselves might play a transformative role, not by serving society's assumed needs, which are assumed to be somehow generated always outside the university, but by playing the role of active producers of new forms of social life, and thus, of course, in a sense of new needs and new ways of satisfying them. So my own support for faculty unionization at the University of Minnesota and elsewhere, I want to emphasize, is very much not simply an attempt to conserve something that I perceive as being under attack, but also equally an affirmation of universities as active agents of change. In the course of talking to people in connection with U of M's unionization efforts, I've sometimes encountered the objection that unions are outdated organizations, that they somehow belong to a bygone moment in the history of labor relations, but that they have no place in the digitized, fast-track, transnational world of early 21st century capitalism. I'm nearly finished. So my response to this would be twofold. First, I don't see struggles for economic justice and democratic participation as going out of date, certainly not anytime soon. And secondly, that such struggles do indeed change and evolve over time, and that a union in the early 21st century, like a university in the early 21st century, can be whatever we're prepared to work to make it. So in fact, I'll end with this thought, if there's anything that actually appears truly out of date in contemporary academia, it's perhaps the now ascendant neoliberal corporate vision of the university. And it's in fact the neoliberal corporate vision that's itself stuck in the past, unable to adapt, unable to embrace change, because it remains hopelessly and anachronistically enthralled to last century's bad, failed economic ideas. So in that sense, for me, a vote for unionization is not a vote to preserve an endangered status quo. It's a vote for change, for genuine change, and a vote for the future and for the role of universities in shaping that future.
All right, fantastic. Our next speaker and award winner is Michael Dreiling, who is here from the University of Oregon United Academics, and the award is for organizing the first faculty union at the University of Oregon, which now has one of the strongest academic freedom policies in the nation. So, welcome. So Michael Dreiling is an associate professor in sociology at the University of Oregon, and he's the first elected president for the university's new faculty union, United Academics, which is now beginning his second term in that position. He served in the AAUP State Conference Council of Oregon since 2010, and his academic work is specializing in political environmental sociology, social movements, trade globalization, and peace studies. He has a forthcoming book, Agents of Neoliberal Globalization, which we'll have to check out. And he's finishing a film about Costa Rica's path of demilitarization and its implications for other aspects of society. So, thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you for the award. It's an honor. Yeah. Well, everybody else has said what I was going to say, except one thing. And it's a quote I dug up from Albert Einstein, and I want to read that quote because quite fitting. He wrote this about joining a union in 1938, and he says, "I consider it important, indeed urgently necessary, for intellectual workers to get together, both to protect their own economic status quo and also, generally speaking, to secure their influence in the political field." And that sums it up. Now, how do you do that? Now, what does that mean? We've heard a lot about what does that mean in terms of a campus game plan. What does that mean in terms of having voice and real shared governance, right? What does it mean in terms of really solving problems through a legal framework, through a collective bargaining agreement? At the University of Oregon, we had for many, many years struggled to have a voice through the University Senate, which we have a kind of unique Senate. We had a white paper that laid out a salary plan in 2000. We had the president in 2003 saying, faculty first, salaries first. Yes, we're going to get back to within 5% of our AAU comparators. 2008, we're going to get within 5% of our AAU comparators. Didn't happen. Senate did not have any teeth. Faculty put energy over and over and over again into the Senate. Good work. I'm a member of the Senate and have been for many years. But when we really intentionally set our minds to organizing a union, and we turned that Senate white paper into an article on salary. We turned it into a proposal that, guess what? In 2 years, brought faculty average salaries up about 11.5%. It moved us so close to our AAU comparators that the administration is now declaring at our second contract negotiations, they're saying, well, actually, you've got so close to your comparators, you don't need any more raises. They're actually using our salary gains from our first contract to try and thwart, of course, a reasonable salary offer on this round of contract negotiations. It's really amusing. And it's like, well, you're going to give us zero, so we go back? No, it doesn't make sense. It's because of the CBA that we were able to tackle that problem. And we were able to not only frame it as a problem as we had done in the Senate, we were able to frame it in a problem in which we had the audience of members of the administration, when we had consistently an ability to follow up on this. And I bring your attention to this because that's just one of the problems that faculty saw. It's a very concrete, specific problem, mattered to faculty. We solved that problem. We're moving towards our AAU comparators in a very consistent and now regimented way, because that's what faculty wanted. And the university administration avoided committing to that. The other thing I want to point out, though, that is very important for what we've done at the University of Oregon, and I think it's important for our case to kind of draw that parallel here to the University of Washington, is we changed the administrative incentive structure for the long-term employment and really shifting of primarily tenure-track faculty to a primarily non-tenure track faculty in about a decade and a half. We have changed the administrative incentive structure for that. Why and how? Well, why was, tenure track faculty have the protection that is of course essential to academic freedom, essential to shared governance. Tenure track faculty, of course, have the protection that all faculty need. And when administrators make decisions to meet budget objectives, enrollment growth, with hiring non-tenure track faculty, they're cutting away not only at academic freedom but shared governance. They're also increasing the workload on tenure track faculty with more committee service, more of the necessary responsibilities faculty have to take on in order to make a good university work as a good university. And so faculty observe this, we note this. And the way we changed this was by setting into and negotiating, all non-tenure track faculty are in our bargaining unit, as well as all tenure track faculty. So we're wall-to-wall bargaining unit of faculty on the campus, with some exclusions that I'd be happy to address in Q&A. But the logic of this is actually beautiful, because what we were able to do is introduce a series of articles that institutionalizes a professionalization of non-tenure track faculty for very clear pathways. We forced a reclassification. The university had misclassified hundreds and hundreds of faculty as adjuncts, term-to-term faculty who had been there sometimes 20 years, teaching without pay raises, on term-to-term contracts, doing vital service to the mission of the University of Oregon, and they weren't regarded as professional players they were in that institution they needed to be. We changed that. Why? We forced a reclassification. You have wrongly classified these faculty members as adjuncts. They are career. Your own classification system. We forced out of 400 adjunct faculty, almost half of all the non-tenure track instructional faculty. Of those 400 adjuncts, 75% were reclassified into one-year contracts, eligibility for promotion, annual reviews, sabbatical eligibility, a big movement on the salary, so nobody could make less than the salary floor that we negotiated. So we changed the logic of the administration in pursuing non-tenure track faculty through that collective bargaining initiative, right? And now it looks a lot different. The other thing we were able to do is to do similar kind of contract work with the research faculty, research associates, postdocs, and others who, for also many years, had been paid below, say, the NIH's salary floor and salary minimums, below those grant minimums. We were able to move that salary floor up for them as well. So those are internal problems we tackled. We see the CBA and our union as a problem-solving instrument. And we use that, we solve problems through a combination of power. Power that we mobilize, with contention. We drag conflicts out from under the rug. We say this is a long-term problem, a structural problem at the University of Oregon. It's not getting heard. Faculty are not being listened to. We want to bring this out from under the rug. Let's deal with it now at the table. We've got a legal framework with which to handle this. Let's do that. And collaboration. So conflict, collaboration. Two forms of power, two forms of expression. We got to balance that, obviously, to get things done because we have long-term relationships, professional objectives to accomplish together. And we're able to do this. I meet weekly with the senior vice provost now as president of our union. I do this with a team of other union leaders. and a team of administrators, and we address problems proactively, preemptively handling things before they become grievances, or when they become grievances, we work through them as well. So we have these conflict resolution strategies. So I throw this out there in order to build that collaborative framework of shared governance and renew it and transform it through a union, not just, now the interesting thing is, not just the Senate, but we've reinvigorated the Senate in the process. Secondly, I want to take this other piece of Einstein's quote and say, political sphere. What mattered here? As we were organizing, in 2012, we decided, January 2012, our organizing committee decided to drop cards, make a vote, go for it. And we did that because we saw something coming down the pike. It was a legal change that the board, that the various interests had been mobilizing in the state of Oregon for, which was to create independent board of trustees per campus. Phil Knight and Nike had been very important forces in that legislative campaign. Phil Knight himself contributing about $500,000 to that campaign over about 2 years. So we saw that this was a potential threat to what remnants of shared governance remained. We needed the union intact before that governance change occurred. We did it. We set the votes. We won a vote with about 58% of faculty vote, or all faculty voting 58% in favor. University challenged us immediately. Took us. They were appealing the decision with the Employment Relations Board in the state of Oregon. We're seeing this. We had allies in state in AFT, SEIU, AAUP. We contacted the governor. We put pressure on the governor. And simultaneously, while we were putting pressure on the governor to say, you got to recognize this vote, you can't challenge the bargaining in it. And the governor was dialed in, made the call to the president. Same time we were doing that, we had our allies lobbying in the state legislature to make sure faculty got a seat on the board of trustees, because guess what? Our own university president was lobbying against faculty having a seat. So in the political sphere, even before we formed our union, we were building political power and political voice in Salem. Now, 2 years later, we got our first contract, negotiating our second. I go to Salem, I meet with a legislator, and they say, oh, it's so refreshing to hear a real faculty member's voice, not an administrator. It's so different, they say. So different than what the administrators say and how they talk about the university, the values of the university, the purpose of the university. It's a niche that needs to be filled. It's a critical voice. We bring that voice now because we're unionized, not because, not through our Senate we could do this. So I kind of lead, everything I think about now with this idea in terms of what a union does is it allows faculty to draw out conflicts that have been stuffed under the rug, and through kind of a healthy, contentious campus politics, we bring those issues to the surface. We have thoughtful, meaningful, engaged debates, sometimes struggles, and then we find a collaborative means to solve them. And the more of the collaboration, the better, and I think we're seeing more and more of that too. We're a very new union. We had a big fight to get recognized as well as to negotiate our first contract. I see the collaboration underway. We just recently have observed at national conferences the work we've done to expand the rights, protections, and professionalized pathways for non-tenure track faculty as a national model. And I think our contract language is very elegant and very powerful in that regard. We maintain right now that the political work that lies ahead for us is going to be the most productive, because right now that's where faculty voice has been most lacking in the state of Oregon. And we're building a very important political initiative in our own local union, but in alliance with all public sector unions in the state of Oregon. So one of the things I'll just mention, and I'll end on this, is it's called Invest in Oregon campaign. So it's a response to what I think all of us see as writing on the wall. Our public goods are in jeopardy in this country and around the world. We are not going to address these as intellectuals by teaching alone. We have to become engaged. I had a state legislator say to me, he's a carpenter, a unionized carpenter for many years, got elected. He says, for a long time, we've thought for so long that the academics just are not engaged politically. And it's great to see you here in the, in Salem. And that just said it to me. intellectuals, academics, it's time for us to engage. And the writing on the wall says if we don't, our public goods are being compromised. And we don't have a say in that unless we get organized, act collectively, work with state and national coalitions to push back on the cuts to national sciences, NASA, NSF. We go on and on, the arts, of course, our own institutions. So it's, frankly, to me, it's about building faculty power, unionizing. It's building faculty power and putting another toolkit, another quiver in our capacities to act collectively towards a common interest and towards a goal of upholding the research and academic missions of our universities. So I'll end with that. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a sign-in sheet going around, so please sign in if you would like to be on our AAUP list. Also, there's food and drink back there. Feel free to get up and get yourself some to make yourself more comfortable. I have a few more awards to issue. One is we have a series here of awards that are issued to faculty who were actively involved in the Faculty Senate to pursue the academic freedom legislation that the Faculty Senate passed this year, which was quite a remarkable accomplishment. So we have one for Janelle Taylor, who is not able to be here. One for Sandy Silberstein, who I believe is here. Sandy, where'd she go? There you are.
I just wanted to say two quick things. One, everything they said about Richard Moore and his colleagues at IALP in terms of unionizing and after 3 years winning a contract is true. They're remarkable. So, and the other is on the topic of academic freedom. I think we discovered this year that for faculty there are two things that are unspeakable. One is Palestinian rights and the other is unions, and I hope you'll join me in making those speakable. Thank you.
Sandy. Next is Gail Steigel, who was also involved in the academic freedom legislation. Is she here, Gail? And Christoph Giebel, you are here. I know you have to run off and teach a class. I suggested you just cancel class, but somehow you wanted to give an exam or something.
That's my exam. Unrelated to this, but I just wanted to say I'm here long enough to when we didn't even have the right to unionize, and we finally won that in 2002, so 13 years ago, and now I think we're on the threshold of something really, really positive and something good. So thank you.
Dan Jacoby, we have an award for you for your tireless promotion of shared governance and for your leadership in establishing the AAUP campaign to advance the standing, respect, and livelihoods of UW lecturers and other contingent faculty.
Thanks very much. It's a little premature. I wish we were done with this issue. It's going to be a long, hard slug. But one thing that I've learned through this process is that it would have been a whole lot easier if we'd had a union.
And our last award this round is for Gerald Barnett. Are you here? Wonderful. For your outstanding contributions to authoring the AAUP statements on intellectual property management and interactions with industry. All right, so next up is Rob Wood, who is our current AAUP president. He worked as a research scientist for the United Kingdom Meteorological Office before becoming professor of atmospheric sciences here in 2004. His research focuses on understanding processes controlling clouds in the Earth's atmosphere and the roles that clouds play in determining climate variability and change. Is that cool or what? There's a lot of other stuff here, but mostly he's in his second term as president of the UW chapter of AAUP, and where he works to improve working conditions for all faculty. And his commitment to shared governance is certainly real and genuine and is in practice every day. Thank you. One note about AAUP at the UW, which maybe you will talk about, but in 2018, we celebrate our 100th anniversary on the UW campus.
Thank you, Amy, for that nice introduction. It is true, the AAUP, this year, National AAUP is 100 years old, founded originally by philosopher John Dewey, and we're going strong, but we've got a big battle ahead. I grew up with the belief, and this is shared with Stuart McLean, we both grew up in the UK, we believe fundamentally that all education, commensurate with the need to participate fully in society, should be provided free of charge, should be a public good that serves to further knowledge and educate citizens. Even the United Nations acknowledge that education basically should be provided to the level at which you need to participate in society. It means higher education should really be free. I grew up with that notion. I came to work in a public institution in the United States that I'm now finding that is turning over into a private institution. I didn't come to work in a private institution. The entire system of public education across the United States is in threat. On our campus, the state revenue crisis is having a big impact. Another departed president, a state financing model that basically devalues academic quality, threatens academic freedom, and undermines job security. The UW needs leadership, and it needs leadership to prioritize instruction, innovation, and full funding for the university's mission of discovery and education. We need a greater faculty voice in that to uphold this mission through solid shared governance. And the AAUP's founder, philosopher John Dewey, as I mentioned before, once wrote that we do not learn from experience, we only learn by reflecting on that experience. Now, we're all experiencing an upheaval in higher education, particularly in public higher education. Across the United States, legislators and governors are systematically trying to dismantle public higher education and are going to destroy, potentially, what are become some of the most powerful engines of innovation, education, wealth creation that this country has ever seen. US universities have been the envy of the world for 50 years or more. Even today, half of the top 100 universities in the world are in the United States, and half of them are public. So public education is not done yet. The battle is not done. But the very concept of a state public university, a system that brings affordable education to its citizens, the very system that allows our state's citizens to participate fully in society, is failing us. It's failing our citizens. Washington State, only 1 in 4 public school graduates from high school is expected to finish college within 6 years. It's woefully low. State spending on the University of Washington has fallen precipitously by almost 50% since 2008, and even before the Great Recession, funding for Washington State's colleges and the universities was far from sufficient. So we shouldn't just look at what's happened since 2008. Since 1990, the tuition burden on student families at the University of Washington has increased by a factor of 4 in real terms, 4. And the state's contribution to the total cost of educating students has fallen to less than a quarter. We do not learn from experience, as John Dewey said. It is only our reflection on that experience that can lead us to declare that enough is enough. Academic freedom is under great threat by the loss of faculty job security across the university and the rise in contingent academic labor. 70% of the University of Washington faculty are now in contingent positions of one type or another. Contingency in our profession is in danger of undermining the entire social contract that we have with the public as educators and researchers. How can we innovate and deliver first-class education when many of the instructors are working hand to mouth, sometimes without even the luxury of reasonable office space? Salaries and working conditions for lecturers among some of the worst in the United States here and are woefully inadequate. And because almost 60% of lecturers are women, this further adds to a problem of gender inequity. Faculty are not in control at the University of Washington, and in case you were wondering. Academic freedom means nothing if the faculty are not given the resources and the power to take the innovative steps in research and teaching that they are supposedly free to do. For example, just a small example, a current one, but the lack of affordable childcare provision for faculty and staff and students on campus is really going to thwart the ability of progressive faculty to want to come to the University of Washington. It's going to start to undermine our quality as an institution. This year's annual faculty survey that we do on behalf of AAUP undertake indicated an inability to obtain pay for children has undermined their ability to, has undermined their ability to perform their jobs. 60% are dissatisfied with the availability of childcare. We have to do something about this. A smaller and smaller fraction of the University of Washington's core budget is being spent on its two key missions of discovery and education. In 2008, instruction and research compensation at the University of Washington now accounts for less than half of all the total employee compensation, down from 53% only 5 years ago. Where is all this heading and what can we do about it? The citizens of Washington State have proven themselves innovative in seeking and finding progressive solutions to complex problems of inequity. For example, Seattle was the first city in the US to pass 15 now, I think, or one of the first, which is a fantastic improvement. The University of Washington's engines of innovation touch every corner of the globe. Our state's companies touch every corner of the globe. We want our university to grow and become a truly world-class institution. To do this, we need a major investment in faculty. We need an investment in faculty in salaries, and we need to end the woefully low salaries for lecturers on the campus, on all three campuses at the University of Washington. We need a better promotion conditions for all faculty. The idea that you're working for a few months and then you might get a contract renewed, that's just totally unacceptable. But at the same time, we need to be innovative in allowing faculty, and not just University of Washington lobbyists, to interact with legislators and improve our political standing in Olympia. As Bill pointed out, that can happen as part of a union. We need to advocate for new revenue streams for the University of Washington. A unionized faculty can achieve this. How much would it cost, for example, to provide free undergraduate education to Washington State residents? It's about the same as the cost of subsidies to Boeing, for example. These are choices. These are choices we can make. It's not a given that tuition rises are going to keep going up. I think working together with other unions, with the other universities in the state, and with other universities across the United States, we can build something bigger than what we have. And we can reverse this trend in higher education. With the collective strengths of faculty working together, these novel ideas for how we could revive higher education as a public good can become a possibility. What will become of innovation at the University of Washington if the University of Washington administration claims the intellectual property of faculty, which it's threatening to do and could well happen? We need a union to become a meaningful player in deciding the very future direction of the university on all levels, from capital projects to online education, to improving our grievance system, to giving teeth to a faculty senate and to their new faculty salary policy that will value loyalty from all faculty and provides opportunities for education and research. This is why the AAUP chapter, University of Washington AAUP chapter, and why I personally am supporting the creation of a faculty union at the University of Washington. We're calling for a campaign, and we're calling it Faculty Forward, because that's where we believe faculty should be in the governance of the university. Creating a union will be very challenging. But looking forward 10, 15, 20 years, I just don't see where we're going to be without collective power to steer the direction of the university. By then, I fear we may have experienced the destruction of our profession. And at that time, it will be too late to reflect. on that experience. So I feel it's my responsibility personally to do something. I think forming a union or trying to form a union is something that we can do concrete now with the help of SEIU. And I'd like to invite all of you and everybody on the University of Washington to join us and create real faculty voice and faculty power. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I first met Rob a few years ago at Westlake Mall, where he was holding the AAUP banner at the Occupy rally. So it's been nice knowing you. I have a few more awards. Next is to Janelle Taylor for her extraordinary chapter service. She shepherded the AAUP through the Great Recession as chapter treasurer, vice president, and president, and she's been a leading voice for the loyal faculty of the UW. Not here, but we will get this to her. Our next award is for John Greenberg, who is here. We are pleased to support John Greenberg in his effort. He is getting the Courage in the Pursuit of Social Justice Award for his Undoing Racism class, the Courageous Conversations classes that he teaches in Seattle Public School classrooms, despite administrative attempts to interrupt his work. And the AAUP chapter stood up to defend your work. You want to say a word? Sure. Yeah.
I am a disciple of Nancy Amade, who's over there. And I'm compelled to say a few words just because the story, it's not my story, but the story I was part of is so connected to everything that you're talking about today. And so if you had a stack of papers to grade in March of 2013, you might have missed this case when it hit the press. But it hit the press because Seattle Public Schools suspended my curriculum on race as a result of one complaint by a white family who was opposed to racial dialogue in the classroom. This was a family that filed a 5-page complaint against me, single-spaced, in the form of a legal brief that accused me of a host of inaccurate things, including that the discussions on race that I was leading overlapped with the steps that lead to genocide, according to an NGO, Genocide Watch. So basically, I was leading my students down a path to genocide, and I had been doing that since 2002. So anyway, they suspended the curriculum, and we fought and got it back, but that's when it hit the press the first time. And then if you had another stack of papers to grade in June, you might have missed this, when the district, stemming from this complaint by this one white family, all stemming from this complaint by this one white family, they chose to transfer me from the center school, sending a message that if you taught about race, it was risky. And also, even worse, was that the voices and the experiences of people of color, particularly my students of color, were dangerous and intimidating, which was a huge travesty because we cannot confront race if we cannot talk about race. And that's what students were doing, and they got punished for it, even if I was the one who was publicly punished for it. And I'll be super quick here, but there was a lot of beauty during that ordeal. Just a quick little story is like during graduation, students rebelled. Students who had to deal with a disrupted curriculum, they rebelled and they submitted a fake speech and instead gave a speech in which they called out Seattle Public Schools, who was under investigation by the federal government for racist discipline, well, potentially racist discipline practices, while they were persecuting a teacher who was trying to end racism. So they called that out during graduation and then had everybody stand up at the end if they supported me, and then they had these t-shirts with a Superman-like chest plate with a G, because I'm told because my last name's Greenberg. And so there was a lot of beauty that year. And if I lived in Hollywood, I would have been reinstated right there. But what ended up happening is I lived in exile at a middle school for a year, and I ended up getting reinstated as a result of arbitration. So the union did play a role. And so they pulled through in the end. But what I like to say is the union pulled through, but it was actually folks like you that pulled me through, because it was without that community support that you could not have gotten through a situation like that. And the fact that you all are strangers, even though we might have taught some of the same students, the fact that I do not know you meant so much to see support coming from the community, and that was a beautiful thing as well. Just one last thing I'll just say about the union, and also I won't say anything about academic freedom, but there's tons tied into this academic freedom. But one thing I'll say about the union is I got to work with two sides of the same union. One side was very deferential to the district and believed everything that they said, even though their investigations against me were completely faulty. One investigation omitted interviews with all of these witnesses of these lessons that were great lessons and were not what this family was accusing me of. But they completely deferred to this district and their faulty investigations. But then there's this other side of this union that fought for this district's continued persecution of me. In January, they led a district-wide effort to try to stop continued punishments of me, and were somewhat successful. But I tell you, there's no question which union was better to work for and which learning environment was better for students. So this is an awesome thing that you're all doing, and I'm so grateful for your support.
John. And our last award is to Ann Mesher for her tireless efforts to advance the cause of providing accessible, quality childcare for members of the UW community. You get the Squeaky Wheel Award. We have one more fairly brief talk from David Parsons, and then we'll do a little Q&A and discussion about why we might want to launch a faculty union drive here. So David Parsons is a teaching assistant in the UW's Department of English, and he serves as president of the Graduate Students Union, the UAW Local 4121, which represents more than 4,000 academic student employees. Grad student organizing began here in 1998, and a year later, members decided to affiliate with UAW, which had recently won a long recognition campaign at the University of California. And by 2000, the spring had collected signed authorization cards from 80% of the TAs and RAs on campus here. But the UW refused to bargain with them, claiming that the state law prohibited it, and so the stage was set for confrontation. And in 2001, the union staged a dramatic 2-week strike that disrupted end-of-the-quarter grading. And in early 2002, the legislature, under heavy pressure to avoid another confrontation, passed a measure extending collective bargaining rights to academic student employees. So, David.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. First of all, thank you very much to AAUP for inviting me. On behalf of UAW Local 4121, AAUP has always been there for us. Rob, the executive board, in our contract campaigns. You've come and spoken at our rallies. You've spoken to the administration on our behalf, and that has not gone unnoticed. Thank you very much, and good luck and good work. Let me also just say how incredibly exciting today is. I've been, as a member of the union, as a leader in the union, somebody who's dedicated a lot of my own time and helped to build something really exciting for unionizing and furthering the academic labor movement. We've been waiting for a long time and love to see the fact and are excited to see the fact that faculty are seriously moving towards unionizing here. UAW is there for you. I can say that on behalf of our board and on behalf of our membership. So in order to keep my comments brief, and I had all kinds of awesome stuff prepared on privatization and corporatization of the university, but everybody else covered that, I think, very well. I'll just say a few things about our process early on and how it was that we became a union, and then if you have questions, we can sort of take it from there. So as Amy mentioned, really what drove the process from the very beginning and has continued to drive the process was the fact that we had such strong majority support, really from every discipline across campus. 80%, 85% on authorization cards for a couple of terms consecutively, and yet the university wouldn't recognize us. This was at a time when there were some student employee unions, but not as many as there are now. And the university's basic position was that we were students, we weren't employees, and as students we weren't providing any kind of service to the University of Washington. That was actually incredibly agitational to those of us who were doing the work in instruction and research, and helped to spur us on to assert exactly how much work we were doing and how critical we were to the university's missions, and why we deserved a seat at the table and collective bargaining rights that would force the university to bargain with us and come to fair agreement on terms and conditions. So after the strike of 2001, we worked to pass a law in 2002 that provided enabling legislation for all student employees. We're often referred to as just the Teaching and Research Assistants Union. We also represent a number of undergraduate student employees who work as tutors and graders and the like. And so the enabling legislation did that and said these are the titles and job types that have collective bargaining rights at the University of Washington. So we were tremendously excited about that, thought that we had gotten ourselves to a position where we could then bargain with the university, but were mistaken. And the university then challenged the petition that we filed pursuant to that law and said that there was a large number of research assistants who they did not believe fell under the definition of the state statute because they thought, again, these were research assistants who were not providing any service to the university, whose work was primarily of benefit to them and not of benefit to the university. So this put us into a long unit determination hearing with PERC, the Public Employment Relations Commission. I think we still hold the record, actually, for the longest PERC hearing in Washington state history. Okay, you haven't done yours yet, right. So try to avoid that. But it took us about a year and a half. We finally prevailed. It really wasn't a question. I mean, it was, in our minds, a very obvious question, and PERC eventually found in our favor, ordered an election, and then we won the election. And as a result of political pressure, membership pressure, after that unit determination process, what finally brought it home to bargaining was the university agreeing not to appeal the decision of PERC. Now, once that was all done, we bargained our first contract in 6 weeks, and this was a first contract after 4 years of organizing. So that maybe tells you something about once the decisions are made in the right ways and by the appropriate people, and the right kind of pressure has been brought to bear on the process, once there's commitment in willing parties, things can really move very quickly. And so since 2004, which is when we bargained our first agreement, we've since negotiated 5 successor agreements. And you know, one of the interesting things I think is worth pointing out in this context is that at the beginning of our unionization drive, when the kind of naysayer argument was, well, unionization is going to corrupt higher education, it's going to strain the relationships between mentors and mentees, it's going to cause problems when it comes to preserving academic quality. We really don't want a union here because it's not in keeping with the values and principles of our institution. I think I'm very proud to say that really the opposite has happened, not just here at UW, but really across the country as a result of the labor movement. And let me just give you a couple of examples. First of all, in terms of salary, we've succeeded at making our pay far more competitive, and for us that includes not just the wage, but also tuition waivers, because as student employees, your overall compensation is how much are you being paid, and then how much do you have to pay back to the university. And we've made huge strides in dealing with both of those things. And we didn't do that alone, certainly, but I can confidently say that the place that we've gotten to, and especially we will be at the end of this contract cycle, would not have happened had we not had collective bargaining. We've also, both on kind of a micro and a macro level, figured out ways to make sure that the changes in the financing of higher education don't leave certain academic student employees behind. And I can tell a story later during Q&A, if you'd like, about fee-based programs, which has been an interesting, in many cases problematic development. And through the collective bargaining process, we've managed to ensure that even with the advent of fee-based programs, that people's rights are protected and that there's parity in terms of what they're paid and what their tuition waivers cover. Beyond that, making the university a more family-friendly place. It's been fun working with Ann on I was about to say provost, the interim president's committee on childcare. We've raised subsidies for childcare that didn't used to exist for academic student employees. We've guaranteed access to lactation stations in our collective bargaining agreement. And we've also, I think, made the union an advocate for underrepresented communities. We've recently negotiated gender-neutral bathrooms in our contract as something that people have guaranteed access for. We've been an advocate for international students throughout our history. And lastly, we've pushed for policies that keep class sizes low, workload manageable, and that enable teaching and research assistants to have access to the decision-making processes that affect our work and affect our students' work. So we've been really proud and motivated by what we're seeing you all doing. SEIU, we've had a great relationship with, such a strong union, and can't wait to see what happens next with you all, and would love to take any questions.
On your chairs is a purple packet, and in that packet is a union card. Looks like this, has some of our pictures on it. About 100 years ago, my grandparents came to the United States from Armenia, and they went to work in the early 30s at Ford Motor Company, which is the United Auto Workers Union of David Parsons fame. And they were early union organizers in that effort in the 30s and 40s in Detroit. And they lived in the slums of Detroit and raised their 4 kids. And my dad used the GI Bill to go earn his PhD in English and became an English professor. It was truly the American dream at the time. That's my family's union history. My brother is president of his union at a community college in California. And I just want to say I signed this card not because I hope that the university will give me a better salary or a nicer office or better working conditions in some way. I really signed this card because I love the University of Washington. And I feel very committed and loyal to this institution. I came here in 1972 to get my undergraduate degree, and I just never left. I got my master's degree here, my PhD, and I'm now an associate professor here. And I am deeply loyal and committed to this institution. But I fear this institution will not survive without the voice of faculty in Olympia. And we will never be invited to have a voice in Olympia, not by our faculty senate, not by our university administration, not by anybody until we have a union. And we can't preserve our institution unless we are in Olympia defending it. So that's why I signed. There are some people in the room who have also signed a card who I would be glad to call on so that you could tell us why you signed. Eva, Libby, Dwayne, you want to come up? Is Moonho Zhang here? Come on up, tell us why you signed your cards. And then get out that card and think about signing it yourself. Who wants to go first? Libby.
I'll go first. I didn't know I had to come up. I thought I just got to stay in the audience.
We're filming this.
That's okay. Well, I I love that story that Amy just told. It must be something about Michigan. I didn't know you were from there, but I am too, and I have a very similar family history to what Amy said. I've heard a lot of great reasons today that make me even happier that I already signed the card, but I'm going to be honest and tell you, for me, one of the leading reasons is I keep hearing this discussion about we need a faculty voice, which I completely agree with, but I'm part of that group. You heard the statistics earlier from Rob, and you can read about them in your packet, that shows how many of us don't have tenure. And while people have found it very difficult to keep me quiet, I know a lot of people don't want to speak up because they don't have tenure and they're scared. And so that's the voice I think that needs to be added that will really help move this university forward to where we want to be. And so as a lecturer, that's why I signed my card.
Thank you.
Hi, I could list a number of reasons, but let me limit it to 3. Number 1, I study labor history, so I understand the power of collective solidarity. Number 2, my brother works at UMass Amherst, where they are unionized. His benefits are a lot better than mine. And number 3, we live in a world where one single administrator, who used to work at UW, can fire a faculty member or unhire a faculty member for lacking civility. That's horrible. Civility is a horrible thing for academic freedom, and for academic freedom, I sign that card.
Well, there's so many wonderful arguments have been made. I sort of feels redundant at this point, but I'll just say that I was actually involved in graduate student organizing a long time ago, the early days, mid-'80s at University of California, and then I arrived at my first position at Indiana University, and debate about unionization has been going on for at least that long. And suddenly the conversation shifted, right? And what I heard was that this is not a labor management sort of situation. We have tenure, we have faculty governance, we're going to compromise those benefits by trying to unionize. That was clearly a debatable position, 25 years ago. It's obviously untenable today for all the reasons that everyone has said. Faculty lines are shifting, they're increasingly untenured lines. Faculty governance exists, the forms of faculty governance continue to proceed, but it's sort of nefarious. It's entirely advisory to a bloated administration that systematically sidelines the outcome of those deliberations and that faculty labor. So, I signed my union card because I think the only way we retain, as everyone had said, the only way we retain any kind of control over the conditions in which we work, in which we research, in which we teach, in which our students thrive, is with a union.
My name is Dwayne Storty. A number of you came up and discussed with me my history of pursuing the enforceability of the faculty salary policy that's in our handbook. Many of you remember the history from 2003, and some of you said that you actually got checked, so I'm glad I could be of little assistance there. What many people are not aware of is that there was a second round of that case, and the state Supreme Court last September ruled that regardless of what promises are made in writing in our handbook, they do not actually bind the administration at all. Until we get a collective bargaining agreement, our salary policy depends entirely on the kindness of strangers. Okay, strangers is maybe too kind a characterization for the people actually involved here. I will also say that I've continued to stay involved in faculty governance. I've been serving on the Senate Executive Committee this year. Jack and other people have done a lot of hard work on the new salary policy that's being proposed. And then to be in the Senate meeting last week and to hear the person who's running the new presidential search to insist that 6 faculty who all hold administrative positions, handpicked by the regents, represent the faculty, suggests that we just might need a union. That's why I signed my card. Thank you.
We're going to do Q&A now. Let's nestle our tables up closer to the audience.
So we have visitors here from both Oregon and Minnesota where organization is actively happening or has just happened. I would like to know what you could share with us about what happened that made it possible or actually occur.
That is the best question in the world, because it took what you just did here. It took the formation of an organizing committee. The AAUP chapter was instrumental on our campus in forming this question. We had a survey of all AAUP members on our campus. There was a resounding yes majority. Let's look into this. I won't yell now. And the AAUP members on the chapter, at the chapter, wanted to have a conversation. We started the conversation. We brought representatives from AFT and AAUP, Collective Bargaining Congress, well, before it was CBC, and we decided, let's do this. Formed an organizing committee. The most important thing about that organizing committee was this: combination of committed, active, tenure-track faculty, non-tenure track faculty, postdocs, and researchers. That mix was the birth of our union, because it changed from an AAUP chapter into a one faculty concept. And the organizing committee essentially led the campaign over the next 3 years to our card check. That's how it happened, was the committed energy of that organizing committee with the help of the national staff representatives on the ground.
One thing that has not been said yet, and I'll pass this to Stuart in a minute, is Washington State's law on faculty unionizing requires a whole faculty effort. We cannot disaggregate sectors of the faculty to unionize separately, so we're going to have to all do this together, all schools and all levels of faculty.
Thank you. Yeah, we're actually in pretty much the opposite situation to that at the University of Minnesota. The Minnesota law prohibits us from having everyone included in the same bargaining unit, so we're wrestling with a slightly different set of legal constraints. As to what set the whole thing in motion, I think for a number of years there'd been growing concern amongst both tenure track and contingent faculty about the treatment of contingent faculty and about the university's increasing reliance on them and the implications of that, particularly for academic freedom. And if this is going to be the direction in which teaching is moving, then that has very serious implications for that. I think there was also mounting concern about the direction of university policy more generally, particularly the what seemed to be the tacit winding down of certain programs like Chicano and Latino Studies, where there'd been a policy of not replacing senior faculty as they retired. And that was only addressed very recently as a result of a campaign by a group of student activists called Who's Diversity, who staged a series of protests, including a building occupation, actually, which finally spurred the administration to agree to replace the soon-to-retire chair of the program. There were also a sadly unsuccessful attempt to unionize by graduate student employees at the University of Minnesota, of which a number of faculty were very supportive, and I think that may have gone some way towards planting the seeds of a further unionization effort, and also the successful unionization effort by adjunct faculty at Hamline University in the Twin Cities. So again, I think there were a number of internal factors that got the ball rolling. Although we're at a very different stage, obviously, we're still in the process of getting people to sign cards, and we hope to move towards filing sometime in the course of next academic year, but there's still a considerable amount of work to be done.
All right, question over there, would you like to come forward? Okay. And Bert, our loyal treasurer, has requested that I remind you that joining the AAUP is always possible and that you can do that online at our website. Would you like to ask a question?
I had a question, yes.
Here you go.
Which is, can somebody speak more specifically to the definition of all faculty that would be part of the bargaining unit in terms of research, teaching, lecture, tenure track, how big, and is there any, are there any decisions to be made along the way about that, or is that already set by?
And tell us your name.
My name's Marcia Myers from social work.
Yeah, the law, the enabling legislation here defines everybody who is 1/6 time or above as part of the bargaining unit. So in our cases at our 4 institutions, that was almost everybody who worked there except for the people who were on very, very sporadic quarterly contracts. It becomes a little bit difficult it became a little bit difficult on our campuses to determine that, because what constituted one FTE varied wildly from the college to college, department to department. So there definitely was some sorting out that had to be done about that. But it is fixed in the law. It's not something that gets negotiated with the administration. It is everybody who is 1/6 time by the definition of their unit up to full-time, and everybody in that gets to vote. Everybody in that is a part of the bargaining unit. The administrations at least 2 of our universities tried to challenge that and wanted to claim that it was only people who were half-time and above, because in the law there is a mention of the faculty senate, and on a couple of our campuses you weren't eligible to be on the faculty senate unless you were half-time or above. That challenge was crushed by the Public Employees Relations Commission, and it's been pretty firm what the bargaining unit is in this state since 2003.
Michael, did you have something?
Yeah, I think probably relevant for a research institution is the doctoral programs make a difference, because one of the things we encountered, the legislation in the state of Oregon does not have the restriction that you have here in Washington. So basically any FTE could qualify for membership in the bargaining unit. But what disqualified some faculty from inclusion in our bargaining unit was whether or not they had, and this was legally determined, somewhat subjective, but the Employment Relations Board makes this decision. It can be appealed. The decision is if a faculty member has supervisory relationships over other faculty members who would be included in the bargaining unit. And what that resulted in for us was, and we fought this, we wanted to have department heads in the bargaining unit. We did not get department heads in the bargaining unit. And we have argued, and we still maintain, that department heads do not hire and fire, and even with non-tenure track or adjunct faculty. And so it's something we're in active conversations about still, and actually there's some folks in the administration who are open to thinking about this further, because it's complicated and it's a bit of a pain in the ass for the administration as well to not have the department heads in the unit. So I'm just saying those are some things that do come up, and you can't fully expect or define all the outcomes in that respect.
We haven't spoken to research and teaching, so folks who have full research appointments with full research non-state funded positions.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And in this state, the chair question has been settled, and chairs are part of the bargaining.
Oh, good for you.
My university actually made an attempt to try to define chairs as not part of the bargaining unit, and they were crushed in a PERC decision that still gets passed around as one of the most crushing defeats for any boss in the state. I mean, it's a good read if you like PERC decisions, but
That's a good one.
department chairs are absolutely part of the bargaining unit in this state.
Come on up, Jay, so you can ask.
I think I have a lot of questions. Jay Johnson on the AAUP Executive Board. What's the role of couple of years ago, I think the state legislature wanted to do away with tenure. I mean, are these kinds of things involved in getting the 16 votes or whatever?
16 votes. Should we let Louisa go first?
I think it was actually a long, steady accumulation of grievances not being addressed, a number of decisions that the administration took that finally pushed adjunct and contingent faculty and a lot of tenured faculty to the point that talking about a union was the only way to go. And I have to say, you're probably going to find that the administration can be your best organizer. They really will. They're going to, all right, I won't make predictions, but they can blow it in ways that make it increasingly obvious to fence sitters where the best bet lies and can convince more people to join your union movement than you can ever.
Somebody want to add to that?
That was certainly true in our case. I mean, bad bosses get unions, and that was certainly true in our case. I think, though, the conditions that prevail in public higher ed right now, I mean, we went from having very bad presidents to having very good presidents. And I think eventually we would have unionized other people. The conditions that prevail in public higher ed today force anybody in the boss position to essentially become a bad boss, no matter how well intentioned. And I think if you depend on serendipitous events and don't do the kind of organizing that people are talking about, you'll lose. That this has to be a faculty effort, and it has to be an effort of a big and cohesive organization. I mean, you certainly want to use the found good fortune, but if you're depending on that, that's not a strong campaign.
All right. So there's food to be eaten and wine to be drunk, so we're going to break soon, but let's have a couple questions. So,
I think one quick comment in response to that. There was an earlier unionisation effort by University of Minnesota faculty before I arrived there. I think this was late 90s, which was prompted by an initiative by the Board of Regents to abolish tenure. And this initially at least, demanded very widespread support, and they collected enough signatures to file, at which point the administration backed down. So then a lot of people didn't vote in the final election. It was still a close result, but it didn't go through. So having some sort of single catalyzing event can actually potentially can work against you. Sorry?
Is that still in the air?
No, it's not been mentioned again since then. But yeah, it was really I think it was the prospect of unionisation caused the faculty administration to back down, but this unfortunately, because it was essentially a single issue campaign for a lot of people, once that had gone, there wasn't the follow through in terms of winning the vote.
Very good. So there was a question over here.
No, I'll just stand here.
Okay, tell us who you are.
Tell who I am. I'm Ed Ruckel. I'm a faculty member. I have a question for Michael. And you brought up your ortholog to our Board of Regents, I think. And my problem right now has to do with the Board of Regents. One, I don't know what the actual assignment of the Board of Regents is. I haven't found it anywhere in our papers. And secondly, I wonder if you've negotiated that you have a voice in appointing the Board of Regents.
That's a good question. I want to prelude this with anticipate arguments against unionization. I just want to throw that out there. It's important to do that for an organizing committee and really think through and be prepared. One of them that we found in Oregon was there was a group of faculty who opposed the union campaign while we were conducting our organizing. And this was over several years, and they developed some coherence, and it had begun to place hope, and they actually called it the independence movement. It consisted of maybe 30 or 40 faculty, and they had placed hope in the new legislation that would establish an independent board, and that's why staff is of the State Board of Higher Education. And little did a lot of faculty know that that independent board would be controlled by big private governors who had lobbied for it very strongly and firmly since about 2008. So we had to rebut that argument. The result of this, of course, has been a board of trustees that now it's a politicized subject for faculty. We have a political project now because we don't have adequate representation voice, members of the community. It's a complete corporate board with the exception of the struggles that the represented staff had, that we had, and the students had to get seats on the board. Those are the 3 seats we have. Nothing, of course, that could stop or prevent egregious actions by the board, which we found out in December of this last year when they attempted to gut the policymaking authority of the University Senate. Literally, they attempted to do this. We had a massive defensive maneuver we had to conduct and then go on offense. And now we are understanding we need to build a political campaign for the next several years to change the way the governor appoints board members of the Board of Trustees, and that they need to include community members, an elected faculty member, and so on. So it's a political subject, and we now have to build power and voice and influence over it. And we get to do that with our unions.
Thank you. In this state, I mean, since we've organized at the 4 regionals, for those institutions, the governor now asks for recommendations from us. Both Governor Gregoire started to do that after we organized it, and Governor Inslee has done that. They don't always take our suggestions, but we are now on the governor's radar screen in terms of asking us for suggestions when a seat comes open.
Yeah, we've gotten that too.
And you'll notice that all the corporate members of the UW Board of Regents were appointed by Christine Gregoire, who is our commencement speaker remarkably this year, for reasons that escape me. Any more questions? One more back here. You'll recall Christine Gregoire nearly lost her first race for governor, in part because she was president of a racist sorority here in 1968 that would not accept black girls.
Scary. My name is Peter Messenger, and I'm a member of AFT, University of Washington English Language faculty. When we did negotiator training with AFT before we actually became a union, we were asked, who are your allies? Who are your antagonists? To very carefully identify those individuals, those organizations. We were very fortunate to have quite a collection of local allies during our struggle to unionize and to negotiate our first contract a year ago, finally. But I would ask you, the members of the panel, the members of the audience, who are your allies? Who can you cultivate as an ally? Who can you count on as an ally to back you up all the way through the process?
Okay, that's a good ending question. Let's start down here, and then we'll end with our UW-based person.
Well, I think my answer to that is we're still in the process of figuring this out ourselves. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I can answer that question. I think that's something I'm in the process of trying to find out at the moment.
Well, I would hope that people who value the importance of public higher education would be allies. That's pretty vague. The AAUP, we would hope to support us, and have already said they will support us. The national organisation, local unions, the Academic Student Employees Union, David Parsons, looking for all support from all unions on campus, but really what we need support from are other faculty members. So other colleagues who will support the campaign and make it move forward.
I think you're going to find your students are your allies, both undergraduate and your graduate students, because I know when I graduated, my quality of life got worse. And the reason is because I had such a good quality of life as a graduate student union member. They will make that case for you, they will back you up, and you need to turn to them. And don't be afraid to look for allies in surprising places. Go to the business school, it's okay. We've got a few on our organizing committee, and they will surprise you. So ask everybody, twice at least.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo Louisa and say students have been tremendous allies for us. The other allies that we can regularly count on are our brothers and sisters in the labor movement across the state, in all kinds of industries across the state. Everybody understands what it is to be a working person, and everybody has been extremely helpful for us, and we've tried to be helpful for them too. But I think Rob and Louisa are both right that right now, the allies you need are the people who can actually vote in your election, which is your colleagues. And Louisa's right. I mean, some of our strongest members right now are from the business school. We have 2 members of the business school on our bargaining team. We have a member of the business school who's on our executive committee. If you don't make an effort to really reach out and understand the arrangements and predicaments of everybody across campus, you won't have the kind of widespread support that you need.
Yeah, this is a great exercise, and it results in some pretty extraordinary results. I think finding who your allies are, and you will observe this, and students, of course, we found the classified staff to be huge allies. They're unionized on our campus, graduate employees, a very strong union. We found, of course, in the process of finding our colleagues who would be allied with our aims as a union organizing campaign to be quite numerous and surprising in some of the areas. We also were surprised to find areas where we didn't have allies, and it shocked some of us, but the business school actually shocked us. There were some good allies there, still are. And of course, you've got good allies here in Washington, right here in these other unionized campuses, and down at the University of Oregon. I want to just say, whatever we can do from afar, you can count on our support in your campaign here. We'll communicate whatever we can, send people up here if we can do that as well. That was an invaluable thing at the moment we proceeded with our card check, was to have allies from other campuses, faculty. I mean, some flew out from University of Illinois, Massachusetts, Portland State, came down, went door knocking, went to go get those cards signed, and I think that's why we got close to 60% on our card check, and so count on us for the same thing, coming from south, coming up north to Seattle here. So, and from United Academics, a mug for you, Amy. We get to buy those as our union, to our ally.
Thank you, that's lovely.
Thanks. So it all starts with members. Couldn't agree more with that basic sentiment. And you know, there was a time when there was sort of a prevailing belief, even within our membership, that organizing happened on a disciplinary basis, and that there would be some disciplines that would be stronger because there was a greater sort of institutional commitment to social justice, and others that would be weaker because there wasn't. It just hasn't borne out. What has borne out is that when there's a person, and they don't even have to be a deeply committed labor movement advocate, just a person who thinks it's a good idea to have collective bargaining and can talk to their colleagues about it, that's what changes the culture in a hiring unit or in an individual department. So those are your primary allies. Now, outside of the bargaining unit, the labor movement, absolutely. Whenever we're having coalition discussions, when you talk to someone who's already in a union, it's basically the conversation is like, just tell me where to sign. I get it. You don't even have to tell me what's going on, just tell me where to sign, right? And that's been extremely helpful over the years. Students, both student government, student activist organizations who do have social justice proclivities and organizing acumen. Faculty, for us, certainly, whether on an individual basis or some level of organization like the AAUP, and then electeds. It's really worth saying. The question from earlier, I don't know if she left, but about the research and the instructional side. When you have a member of Congress who's calling the president of the university and saying, we have authorized funding to come to the university to support the research mission, and from what I'm hearing, this money is not being spent in the way that Congress would like for it to be spent, and it's not being spent on the people who we think are driving the research mission of the university. That's a powerful message, and that's true both at the state, federal, and local levels. It was great to see you give an award to Shama Sawan, who recently has been very helpful for our campaign. So.